congested, congested, a little bit just FYI. So I might say some jokes that y'all might not laugh at, but for my own self-esteem, I need y'all to laugh at them like they're actually funny. Please, it'll be my personal laugh track here. I told that to Jillian. She's like, how do I know when you're going to say a joke? I'm like, oh wait, you'll know. So, I love Christmas. I love singing Christmas carols. Of course, only in the shower because Jillian thinks my voice wouldn't bless everyone else, wouldn't bless the public if I sang for all to hear my Christmas cheer. I love Christmas cookies, trying all the different shapes that people make, the fun little designs. And I love decorating our house with all these different Christmas decorations. Of course, our Christmas tree. You see, we've only been married, well, we've only had one Christmas that we've been married, so we don't have that many decorations at our house. But one thing we do have a lot of are Christmas ornaments, the one that say that our first Christmas ornaments. It's like everyone who went to our wedding was like, oh yeah, I know the perfect gift to give them. Like the gift to give them. I'm going to give them our first Christmas little ornament. That's great, but there's quite a few of them, which makes that kind of interesting now. Well, one wedding gift that we do have, though, is a nice little nativity set. It's one of those willow tree nativity sets. I don't know if you guys have seen those willow tree little figures. They're the ones like a blank face. That's it. Very simple. Well, this little nativity set has just Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus and like a shepherd and like two little animals, two little sheep just looking at him. There's no barn. There's no trough that Jesus is laid in. It's just that pretty simple little set. But of course, this is a nativity set, and you have to have some reason, you have to have that set up somewhere. Because listen, you can have Santas all around the house, you can have snowmen, even reindeer, but if you're a Christian, you gotta have something to remind you of the reason for the season, as they say, because Christmas is about the birth of our Savior, not about the blessings of our Santa. One of my professors at Ozark, Shane Wood, said how every year he goes and sets up his nativity set, and he clears the space off of his piano, and what he does, he sets up his nativity set with just like everyone else, with a little manger and Mary and Joseph and Jesus and some shepherd and some sheep, maybe a bull next to it, or a cow, something like that. But what he does next is grab a little red toy dragon and place it in the back of this nativity set. He says he does this to remind him of Revelation chapter 12. His wife goes and sees this nativity set up and says, man, what's happening, Shane? What's going on? Well, every time the wife will take the dragon and hide it somewhere, and Shane will come back and find the dragon, not the nativity set, so he'll take the dragon and put it back next to, like, overlooking baby Jesus' face. And the wife will come and take that dragon away, take it back, and Shane will come by, find the dragon somewhere else, and then put it back in the nativity set. And his wife said, man, Shane, what is the problem? Why do you keep on putting this dragon in the nativity set? And Shane said that he does this to remind himself of Revelation 12, like I had just said. Because Revelation 12 tells us that there is a dragon seeking to devour this woman's offspring. And that even though the advent of the appearing of Jesus Christ has come, the inbreaking of the kingdom of God has begun, there's a dragon there. There's a dragon who's doing all he can to derail God's promises and his plans for your life. So Christmas morning is coming, and it's coming pretty fast, as we all know. Way too fast. Way faster than we already think it will be, because we don't have any of our presents purchased or seeing all the family members like we talked about right now in the right time. But Christmas morning is coming fast, and we get to celebrate the first coming of our Lord. And as we do, we must remember what's behind this scene with the baby in the manger. Revelation 12. And Revelation 12 tells us that peace has come, but the dragon's still here. So we'll be in Revelation. And when we read Revelation on our own, we realize that quickly realize that John wrote Revelation in a pretty interesting way. I mean, we need to understand first what John has already seen by the time we get to chapter 12. So I'll give you guys a little recap real quick. We'll be in chapter 12, but I'm going to recap you. In Revelation chapters 1 through 3, John has already heard what Christ thinks of the church. He begins encouraging and confronting the ethics in the churches that he's writing to. So in chapters 4 and 5, John has already witnessed God sovereignly on the throne, and the Lamb worshipped as one with him. See, before John lays out his apocalyptic visions, he shares with us how God is on the throne. And it is so important that we keep that at the forefront of our mind, not only through today's sermon, but through every day in our life, that God is on the throne. If you guys take anything out of my message this whole morning, take this, that God is on the throne. Let's say that again.
God is on the throne.
Okay, amen. God is on the throne. I did not expect y'all to say it back. God is on the throne. Indeed he is. I love it, yes. That's a truth that we are clinging to no matter what our lives look like. So in Revelation chapters 6 through 11, we see how the nature of Revelation is repetition. It's kind of like a cycle. I mean, there's a series of 7 seals, trumpets, and bowls, and they all represent one event, getting more and more intense, just to show just how serious God's judgments are. And after each series of these 7, the world ends. So this means that if we read Revelation on a linear timeline, as we confine it to our own Western understanding, we'll miss what John is trying to tell us. Because if we read it as like just a straight line, the end of the world has already come, and 3 times at that, which obviously isn't the case, and we will miss what John wants to tell us. You see, this is apocalyptic literature. And this apocalyptic literature, this type of literature, came about from about 200 BC to about 100 AD. And an aspect of apocalyptic literature is that it's full of symbols and pictures that can represent a number of different things and at different times, which means that it has a lot of different overlapping layers, which makes it a little bit difficult for us to understand because, once again, we like making some pretty clear and cut connections. We like things pretty obvious for us. But in Revelation, this is not the case, which makes it more difficult to understand that for us. But knowing this, we'll get into Revelation chapter 12 finally. Revelation 12:1. John writes, "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and she cried out in pain as she was about to give birth." But verse 3 says, "Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of out of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment that he was born." Now, anytime a sign is mentioned in Revelation, it means that it's a symbol of cosmic proportions tied to God's people, connected to God's people. I mean, signs point to something. We all know this, right? Whether you're on the highway and there's a sign that tells you when to exit the highway, or whether you're in a conversation with your wife that's not going too hot, and the sign on her face tells you need to exit this conversation right away. Signs point to something. We know this. So hang with me here. I'm going to begin a little bit deep at first, because I want to really bring out the beauty that is in the gem of Revelation 12. What we believe sometimes, Revelation kind of feels like a bottomless pit, right? Well, I want to bring out that gem deep down inside that bottomless pit that we feel like it is. This sign points to this woman who's about to give birth. And this woman could either be understood as Eve, or this woman could be understood as Mary, or even Israel, or the disciples. But whoever it is, this woman symbolizes the holder of the promise of the Messiah and the community that he leads. This woman is a representative of God. She represents God's ability to birth new people for himself. And we all who celebrate Christmas, because Jesus made it possible for us to experience this new birth of the Spirit, can thank God for this woman in Revelation 12. But we'll get into that more as we go along. But then it says that another sign appeared in heaven, of this giant red dragon that tries to eat the baby the minute that's born. This giant red dragon was just waiting. He was waiting to snatch up that baby the minute that it's born. So have you guys ever seen a cat about to snatch up and attack something? I had two cats growing up, and although I'm a dog person, I think that cats are pretty funny sometimes. Yes. It's like when you see a cat and it spots like a fly on the end of the table. This cat will sneak up to it, and it'll get back up on it, stiffen up its back, and get ready to pounce on it ever so slowly. And then all of a sudden she goes, just gets it, kills that little fly before that fly even had a chance to recognize what was happening to it. And that's kind of like what happened when this dragon, what he was trying to do with Jesus or his followers, who are the people of the promise, when they were about to be birthed into the world. But unlike a cute little kitty cat, this dragon is our ugly, unseen enemy with 10 heads, or 7 heads and 10 crowns. 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on those heads. There we go. John's Gospel tells us that this dragon's only desire is to steal, kill, and destroy. And sometimes this dragon has a pretty loud roar. It'll do all it can to derail the plans of God and to disrupt the faith of its followers. But then we see something pretty cool. Verse 5 says, "She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne." Verse 6 says, "The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days." You see, even though this dragon was waiting to chomp down on this baby the moment that it was born, God still protected this child, and he still protected this woman. Later on in Revelation 19, we see that the one who rules the nations with an iron scepter is none other than Jesus Christ himself. It's interesting because he rules the nations, all of the nations, not just Israel, with an iron scepter, which speaks of his royal power. This little bit is actually quoted from Psalm 2. And Psalm 2 is a messianic psalm that attributes the Messiah with authority and with power. So this Psalm 2 tells us in verse 4 that the one enthroned laughs at the nations as they rise up against the Lord and his anointed. Jesus' royal power isn't displayed as one that boasts of how big and bad and powerful that it is, as it forces nations to submit to him, but Jesus rules through shepherding. Shepherds care for and they provide for their sheep as they guide them to the source of life. They call each sheep by name, they're gentle with them. So the shepherd, the male child who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, does so in love as he leads his sheep to the source of life. But shepherds don't just provide for and guide for their sheep. They protect them from savage wolves. They'll do whatever needs to be done to keep their promise to the sheep that no one will be able to snatch them out of their hand as long as they remain the shepherd of those sheep. But we also read in Revelation 2, verse 26, when the angel writes what Jesus is speaking to the church in Thyatira, he says in Revelation 2:26, "To the one who is victorious and does my will to the end, I will give authority over the nations. That one will rule them with an iron scepter and will dash them to pieces like pottery, just as I have received authority from my Father." So you see, we get a share in this as well. We get the privilege of ruling the nations, not as the world rules them, but as the shepherd does, which is through love. This child is a threat. He leads the nations toward a belief in God's power and his rule, and therefore away from the allegiance with the dragon. This means that when we live as the church, we are a threat to the devil. I took a speech class at my community college in California, And it was a persuasive speech that day. And this one guy stood up and gave his persuasive speech on how science disproves God. And I'm sitting there like, oh man, I don't want to be the one to stand up and actually say something about this. Especially at a secular community college in California, this is not going to go too well. But I can't just not say anything, right? So when the professor asked, oh, do you guys have any comments, any questions? I'm sitting there, my heart starts pounding. I'm like, oh man, I gotta say something. so I have something. I looked at that guy square in the face, and I said, science doesn't disprove God, science complements God. Science reveals all of God's handiwork and how he works and moves in the universe. See, I was a threat to that guy. Not only was I attacking his persuasive speech, but I was attacking the worldview behind his speech. You see, this guy believed that there was no God, and he was trying to discredit God and to derail God's promises and his plans of carrying them out in the lives of those who were in that classroom. And I confess that I have not stood up nearly as much as I should for the gospel, but this is one time when I was like, man, I know I'm going to stand up for what I know and believe is true. There were 2 Muslims in Syria who came to Christ. They realized just how threatened the devil was by them, and how he's doing everything in his power to derail God's plan with them. So when interviewed, this one Muslim, the wife Karima, ex-Muslim I guess, said, up until now, my parents didn't know about my conversion because they fled to another country. My family is very conservative. They're Shiites. If they heard about my conversion, they would kill me. We would lose our children. The reporter says that after becoming a Christian, Fadi, her husband, also faced challenges. He was attacked by 2 people. Fadi says that they hit me and one of my eyes was damaged as a result. But the report says that in addition, Fadi sadly disclosed that after his parents had found out that he'd become a Christian, they rejected him. Then a pastor at church in Lebanon explains that Karima and Fadi's experiences are not all that unusual. So we are a threat to the devil, and we rule the nations by loving on people with the very same love of Christ. But God took care of this woman and the child. This child was taken up to God's throne, which is the chief metaphor for God's reign. And this woman fled into the wilderness, which is also a metaphor used a lot for a place where God had protected and taken care of his people. So you see, this chapter starts out with a glorious description of the woman. At the end of the first 6 verses of Revelation 12, we read about the God-given provision of that woman. John is addressing the 7 churches who are in Asia Minor and telling them some pretty good news. I mean, he's telling these churches who are being persecuted by the giant, the massive, the scary Roman Empire that, yeah, the enemy is pretty big. Yeah, the enemy is pretty scary, he's pretty vicious, and he's pretty hungry, and he's pretty mean, and he's out to get you. But he can't derail God's promise to save his people. God preserves the promise by protecting the woman and her child. But God, as the good shepherd he is, protects the woman by defeating the dragon, as we'll later see. Then we get into verse 7. Verse 7 says, Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down. Who's that great dragon? The ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. All right. So wait a minute. When did this happen? Did this event, verses 9 or 7 through 9, did this happen before the dragon tried to eat the baby? Did it happen before Genesis 1 even, when God had created the heavens and the earth? Because Satan was already on the earth. Satan had already been tempted Adam and Eve. He was there in the garden already. Or is this just like a completely separate event? What's going on right now, right? What is the timing of this all? That's what I feel sometimes reading Revelation. But John isn't too worried about the timing of this all. It's not the point of the story. This is actually just John telling us the same story, just from a different perspective. Remember how at the beginning I said how Revelation is kind of like a cycle. It'll retell the same story multiple times from different perspectives. And all John is trying to tell us is who this dragon was that was waiting to eat this baby. This dragon is the ancient serpent who is called the devil or Satan, and his sole mission is to stop God's promises and his plans for his people. He and his demons fought Michael and the other angels, and they had tried to derail God's plan, and guess what happened? He lost. He was thrown to the earth along with his fallen angels. Well, we don't throw around our social security card. We don't throw around our wedding bands. We don't throw around our pictures of our kids, do we? No, we don't do that. We throw things that we don't give much value to. Or what about when y'all were just teenagers and you had your girlfriend or boyfriend back in junior high school, and you could have sworn that you were just in love. She rolls her eyes like, where are you going with this, Colt? Listen to me. Well, what did you do when you realized that that guy or girl was playing you for your homie down the street? Man, you took his picture he gave you and you dashed it to the ground right in front of him. You broke it into pieces just like he did your precious little hearts. You threw that thing down. You thrust it down to the ground. So this verb here that Satan was hurled down, it's a violent word. It's an intense word. He was thrust out of heaven and down to the earth. See, Satan was playing God, and God thrust him out of heaven. So let me skip down to verse 13. Verse 13 says, when the dragon saw that he'd been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. Verse 14 says, then the woman was given 2 wings of an eagle, where she might fly to a place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she could be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. Verse 16 says, but the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's command and hold fast to their testimony about Jesus. So sometimes we get a little bit bogged down in the weeds of Revelation, which is an incredibly dense book with over 400 Old Testament allusions, which every allusion has their own backstory of their own. Writing this sermon was pretty stressful for me, if I'm being honest with you guys, because when I was researching for it, I got kind of stuck. And how deep should I get with you guys? How deep do I want to get with you guys in this sermon here? And if you guys are anything like me, when I have so much to do on my to-do list, when I ask the wife if she needs some help around the house at all, and she gives me this giant list of things I didn't even know need to be taken care of, I just assume they were always just fine. That was never a problem with us. They were always taken care of. I get a little bit overwhelmed, right? And sometimes I get lost in the weeds and I forget about the purpose behind what I'm doing. So I pray that you don't get bogged down in the weeds of Revelation and can focus on the purpose for what John is trying to tell us. At the end of the day, Revelation 12 tells us that the devil thought he could derail God's plan through eating the baby. But God protected the child and brought him up to his throne. The devil thought he could derail God's plan by eating the woman, but God protected her as she fled to a place where he had taken care of her. The devil thought he could take heaven itself, but God protected heaven by throwing the devil and his fallen angels through the earth. And now the devil thinks he can take the rest of the woman's offspring, the church, specifically those who keep God's command and hold fast their testimony about Jesus Christ. Well, what do we think is going to happen? I mean, we think demons are pretty scary, and rightly so. They are. God doesn't just ask the devil and his demons to politely leave heaven now. Can you guys just leave? But when his promises and his plans get attacked, he will thrust the devil and his demons out of his presence. See, God doesn't mess around in those times that his authority gets challenged. And repeat that. God does not mess around with those times that his authority gets challenged. Go back up to verse 10. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, Now have come the salvation, the power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of the Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before God day and night has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He's filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. So between the sixth and the seventh seals, trumpets, and bowls in Revelation, there's an interlude. Every time a song or a hymn or praise interrupts the story being told, we have to pay attention to it. These little breaks remind the reader of who is really in control. This vision that John sees is pretty crazy. And here I am trying to preach from Revelation and convey these truths to you in a way that not only gets you to understand what the text is actually saying, but preach it to you in a way that where you can apply what the text is telling you to do. It's a pretty hard task, especially with all the judgment and the chaos in Revelation. We need to be reminded of who really deserves to be praised above everything else, even in the midst of such pain and death all around us. Scholar Brian Blount says apocalyptic literature has an ethical motivation. It implores people to act in the present in a way that agrees with its understanding of the future. So Revelation's understanding of the future is this: that heaven has won. Heaven has won the war against the saints that the dragon has started. The brothers and sisters who give their lives to the gospel have won the war. Their deaths weren't in vain. They acted in the present in a way that agrees with their understanding of the future. And their understanding of the future is that God has won. The devil's timeline is short before God will throw him into the lake of fire to be tormented forever and ever. Dr. Mark Scott, one of my professors at Ozark, said that the enemy does not go into his lake of fire without yelling, kicking, and screaming all the way out of the courtroom. He will make life miserable for everyone who believes in the promise of salvation as long as possible. So can I be a little bit raw for a moment? There was a high school in Santa Clarita where I live back in California, as my parents do. Now only like less than 5 miles away from my house. It recently got shot up by a high school student. And the high school student killed 2 other students and wounded 3 others before turning the gun on himself. They're not sure why he did what he did. But it nonetheless is something straight from the pit of hell that the devil and his demons had worked out in this poor student's mind to carry out this horrible act. And there was no doubt in my mind that this wasn't spiritual warfare at play here. Or take the Columbine shooting. A Columbine high school in Littleton, Colorado. 2 teens went on a shooting spree on April 20th, 1999, killing 13 other people, wounding 20 others before turning the gun on themselves and committing suicide. One student, Cassie Burnell, was asked by one of the gunmen if she believed in God. And when she said yes, the guy blew her away and shot her to death right in front of her. Cassie Burnell is one of these saints in heaven that shout, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. I triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of my testimony. I did not love my life so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and rejoice, you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He's filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. Woe to those who haven't been martyred, who are still living on the earth where the devil has influence over us." But what this little interlude, what this interruption tells us is that our enemy is a defeated foe. Dr. Mark Scott again, he said, "The devil is on a finite eschatological collision course with the Creator. While defeated and already sentenced, he will make as much trouble for the saints as possible as he marches off to a lake of fire. So don't you think that these innocent people who are killed for nothing less than their belief in God that is greater than death, don't you think that they know how painful it is living in the world in which the devil is a madman, trying to take out as many people as he can before he's ultimately destroyed forever? These martyrs gave their life on earth because they know where their true lives lie. So let me ask you, did God protect the martyrs even though they were slain? Did God protect high school student Cassie Burnell even though she was slain? Did God protect most of the apostles even though they were slain? Did God protect Jesus even though he was slain? He did. He protects his people of the promise, and they're safe in his hand, no matter what the devil may do to them. And that is what brings us peace. Satan is hurled down to the earth, which means that his time is limited now. That even though he wreaks havoc and chaos here, God is still sovereign over him, which means in no way does he have the power to derail his plans and his promises. But yet that's exactly what we see him trying to do. Peace has come. The dragon's still here. Or maybe you're someone who sees the dragon's presence before you see God's presence. Maybe for you, my dominant thought should be, the dragon's still here, but peace has come. Maybe it seems like you've been experiencing nothing but the dragon pursuing you. Maybe you're currently dealing with something that has such a loud roar in your life that convinces you that it's bigger, that it's more powerful, that it's more present than our Lord. Maybe this dragon is all you can see, hear, and feel, while peace is just sitting there minding its own business in the corner, not really doing anything with your life. He protects his people of the promise. They're safe in his hand. No matter what the dragon may do to him, and that is what brings us peace. So this Christmas, when you look at your nice little nativity set, remember that there is a dragon seeking to devour you, honestly. But more importantly than that, remember that peace has been birthed into the world, and nothing can triumph over what God has done, what God is doing, and what God will forever continue to do. Because he protects his people of the promise, and they're safe in his hand, no matter what the dragon may do to him. And that is what brings us peace. God, I thank you that you have